Yo everyone, this is Dean. Oh mate, this feels so weird, man. I'm starting a YouTube channel. Yeah, so as you can see, I was quite excited there. I bought a new camera, and those first few seconds were the only things from my old recording that I wanted to keep because I didn't feel like pretending to do that again. So I've been in between jobs right now. I haven't been working for the last few weeks, and I've been stuck at home and it's lockdown. My one aim for this time off before I start my new job is to create something. And I've had this goal and motivation to create something, but what I've found is that when I actually come to do it, there's a lot of resistance there. So there were a few ways that I overcame that, and that's what I want to share with you. So if you're like me and you want to create something, you're stuck at home, here's a few ways that I found useful for me to help overcome creative barriers. I've been watching this guy called Ali Abdal on YouTube recently, and I really like his videos. He's a doctor that quit being a doctor and now he's a full-time YouTuber. So he was talking to this guy called Austin Kleon, who's an author who wrote a book called Show Your Work. They were talking about what are the benefits to putting your work online. One of the points Austin talks about is you don't have to be a genius. So when I was starting this new venture in creating YouTube videos, it felt daunting because there's so much that I haven't done before that I'm doing for the first time. So he was talking about how you don't need to know everything before starting. Just start and you'll pick things up along the way. Also, when starting new things for the first time, the way our brains work is when we do anything, we'll look back to our memory to see if we've done it before. And if we've done it before, then that will give us more confidence to be able to perform the task competently. So when I'm doing these YouTube videos, I'm looking back into my memory bank and it's blank. There's nothing there. And so because I haven't done this before, a part of my brain tells me that I'm not going to be good at it because there's no evidence from my memory that I've performed this task successfully. But with any new skill, there's going to be a period of time where you pick that all up. So another thing they were talking about in the podcast was you will achieve quality through quantity. They spoke about this study where there were two groups of people and they were both asked to make pots. The first group were judged by the final quality of the pot, so just make one pot as good as you can. The second group of people were judged by how many pots they made, so it didn't matter about the final quality of the pot. But then they looked back at the final quality of the pots, and it turns out that the group that made the most pots ended up having the better final quality pot. The point of that study was you will find quality through quantity. Quantity doesn't always lead to quality in everything, but in creative tasks like making this YouTube channel, quality will come through the number of videos I do. So rather than spending ages making one thing, it's better to make as many as you can. What Ali Abdal was saying was, in your first 50 videos, they're going to be trash anyway, so you might as well just get them out of the way. And then afterwards, you'll realise that you've learned a lot through that. So I saw this graph when I was doing this online course about technology entrepreneurship, and it talks about how you'll need a lot of time before you can start being successful. And the same principle applies to creating stuff or becoming good at any skill. So the graph for me shows that there's a lot of time that will be needed where you're going to be failing. That down period is when you're most likely to fail, you're most likely to quit. So it's important that in this time, in that space where you're failing, that you don't quit, because like quality comes eventually if you keep persisting. So one way of looking at the reason why people do anything is because they value the connection they gain from it. So people will connect to food, they connect to family, connect to friends. That all comes from a fundamental desire to connect with reality. So creating stuff is one of the biggest ways in which you can get that connection to reality. So also there's something called the learning pyramid. What the learning pyramid shows is you remember 10% of what you read, 20% of what you read and listen to, you remember 75% of what you practice doing, and then you remember 90% of if you teach it to someone else. When you're trying to learn anything, if you teach it to other people, you will retain way more information than if you just kept it for yourself. Because when you teach something to someone else, you have to remember it properly. And it's that necessity that makes you remember stuff. So yeah, I've just been spending a lot of time reading, watching stuff, listening to stuff, just taking in a lot of information. There's only a certain amount of information I can take in before I start getting tired. Instead of just writing it down and looking back at it sometimes, it's more powerful to teach it to other people because that forces the information into my memory. So for me, teaching other people the things that I've learned is a way to better remember that information. So yeah, doing something new, there's always going to be resistance. So resistance is something that is mentioned a lot in this book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And what he defines resistance as is like a mental block that stops you from doing things that you want to do. And he talks about resistance being psychological. The resistance comes up more strongly the more challenging a task is. It was weird because I knew that I wanted to do this, but yet when I'm trying to do it, I've got all these other things coming up in my head, like go watch football instead, go outside. Yeah, it's procrastination. So he talks about the way to defeat that resistance is to go against your comfort zone and go against the intentions of your brain that's trying to comfort you. So also another thing I did was I planned out between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. that's just going to be YouTube time. I'm going to do whatever I can to work on it. And in that time, I noticed when thoughts were coming up, like go downstairs and have a snack, go outside, go look at your phone. So the way that I overcome that resistance was telling myself that I've booked this time out for this specific task. So any other action, just don't do it. Even if I'm hungry, just don't do it. I ain't gonna die. So that was useful in overcoming the resistance. And a big thing was the hardest time you ever do something new is the first time you do it. Any time after that, it gets easier. And what I found is there's so many tasks that it can feel daunting, but I broke it down into tiny segments. So what's the one small thing I can do next? And then the hardest thing about doing anything is starting it. And there's always sometimes that 10 to 15 minutes where you're not in the zone. There's that buffering time, which is really easy to just come in and out of the task. So keep looking at your phone. I need to do another video on that. Deep work, Cal Newport. But that's for another day, man. That's for another day. Or way more footage here than I need.